Welcome into Sports4CLE. I'm Mac Robinson, in for Dave Bacon. A little bit of a preview there of what we saw earlier today from Cleveland Browns training camp, and we'll get into that here in a little bit with Camryn Justice. But before we get into that, let's get into some of the storylines from today. Big headline, Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills quarterback, gets his extension. First of the three 2018 quarterbacks, first domino down as Josh Allen gets 6 years, $258 million, 150 of that guaranteed. And so one of the biggest signings for quarterbacks, at least outside of Pat Mahomes when it comes to the big number, but most guaranteed money that we've seen for a NFL quarterback. Along with that, we also saw some of the injuries, some of the players that were held out of practice today. Let me go through the laundry list here. We have Ronnie Harrison, safety Grant Delpit, who was out with his Achilles injury. He's still coming back. Anthony Walker, again, still dealing with that knee injury. Montreal Meander, the safety, dealing with a leg injury. Anthony Schwartz still coming along from that hamstring injury as well. Tony Fields still dealing with his foot. And Tack McKinley was excused for personal reasons. And Jarvis Landry had a personal day off from training camp earlier today. And another storyline that we saw was Mack Wilson, who came out and talked about last year his struggles coming back from injury, and his disappointing play last year led to him almost quitting and almost retiring from football. But with the big news of the day, the Josh Allen extension, let's bring in WEWS Channel 5 digital content producer Camryn Justice. And Camryn, you know, Josh Allen securing the bag, getting the money, getting his extension. Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, those extensions are looming. What were your reactions, and what was your thoughts seeing Josh Allen getting that huge extension?
I mean, the first initial thought is this is where the market is. That sets the bar right there. The market has been reset. And Josh Allen's contract right there, that's going to lay the groundwork for these other quarterback extensions like Baker Mayfield here in Cleveland, like Lamar Jackson. And I think it's a really big thing to look out for, because that was a very large contract. I think it's a lot more than a lot of Browns fans maybe expected Baker Mayfield to get paid. But if he's up there in the ranks with them and his contract's going to be mirrored to Josh Allen's and similar to that, then that number goes up a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean a lot of it. And it's a lot of money that you're going to end up paying. So it kind of puts everything in perspective a little bit. Like, the Browns have got to figure out their financial situation, because that extension is looming. And the longer you wait, now you risk the market going even higher when Lamar Jackson hits that deal. And, it goes to the point of, do you sign your quarterbacks early? Do you wait to see? And I think this might be a lesson to other teams and other positions that are looking to get their extensions. It's probably better late than never with all this media payroll rate going up. These numbers are going to keep rising, and you're going to end up paying your players a lot of money.
Yeah, and you mentioned that too. Dak Prescott was one who got paid earlier this offseason, 4 years, $160 million. So you're looking at that $40 million number per season. And now Josh Allen, $43 per season. If you're the Browns, do you sign him sooner rather than later at this point when it comes to Baker Mayfield, to try to limit some of that you're going to end up seeing from the overall number standpoint from the other teams that you're seeing from these extensions?
I think that's a way to go about it. I think that's definitely something that you can take into consideration, is if you do make that signing and you do make that extension sooner, then you don't have to worry about the market getting even higher than it is right now. But I do think it also plays into those conversations that they're having with Baker's agent, and that it all comes down to where they stand and what they're thinking. If his agent and his team is more along the lines of evaluating the market from the outside standpoint and kind of asking what they want for Baker in relation to the contracts of, we'll say, Josh Allen in this situation. If those are the kind of conversations, then yes, you do want to do that sooner than later, because it will just continue to rise. But if it's more along the lines of, if they're not really paying attention to that, which is hard to imagine that they're not, but if they're not paying attention to that, then I think that you have a little bit more leeway if it's in the negotiation process. I think you can wait a little bit if it's not super heavily reliant on that outside market. But I do think that it does play a big role in it. And for me, looking at it, I do think sooner is probably better than later.
And so changing perspective from the future of Baker Mayfield to the current day, you've been at training camp. You were there earlier today. What have your observations been throughout training camp, not just with Baker, but with the rest of the team?
Things are going well so far. I mean, they're winning training camp. I guess like all these guys that you expected to come out and do well are doing that and some. Baker Mayfield, he's been spot on, I would say 90% of training camp, if not more. He's out here throwing lasers and darts, and it just like directly hitting these guys with the numbers. He's got a deep pass today. I just actually shared the video. It was an incredible pass to Donovan Peoples-Jones. Just perfect drop down. And these are the things you like to see out of Baker Mayfield. Just, yeah, it's training camp, and yes, we're early into it, but getting that chemistry going and getting that connection, I think, is really, really important and really good to see out there. And then again, with Donovan Peoples-Jones, he has been the star of training camp. There is no question about that. He is everywhere. Where the ball is, he is. He finds it. It's like a magnet to him. He catches. He comes down with it almost every single time. And then, as Kevin Stefanski said today, they talked about the presence he has on special teams, and that's where he's going to find himself, really making an impact on this team. Clearly, he's fighting for that wide receiver 3 position, and honestly, maybe a wide receiver 2 position. And I've said this before, I think that he might be the future of that wide receiver room. He's got so much promise. He's very young and very talented, and he just keeps impressing. But he's out here, he's delivering on special teams. He's a kick returner. He's covering kicks. He's doing it all, and he's looking really, really good while doing it. And then you've got other guys like Mack Wilson, who talked today, and he's been very impressive, had an interception. He has been all over, covering well, and just he came into camp in great shape. And I think that's the takeaway with all of these guys. Everybody came into camp ready to get to work, prepared. No one came in out of shape. No one came in not ready. Even, the situation with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, where he was out for the first 10 days on that COVID list. He wasn't just out and waiting to come back. He was doing virtual meetings. He was doing virtual practices. He was digging through that playbook and just learning everything he could so that when he came out on the field, he could be ready. And that's kind of the takeaway here at Browns training camp in 2021 is everybody is ready to get to work and show that this is the year that they take it to the next step.
Now, we'll be talking a little bit later about Donovan Peoples-Jones coming up later in the show, but you mentioned Mack Wilson, and he came out earlier today. People were, talking about that Patrick Mahomes situation in that divisional game, but he came out earlier today and said this about the entire situation.
Yeah, I reached out to him on Twitter, obviously, after it happened. Cleared the air, made sure that he was okay. And, what his mom said, I really, didn't pay too much attention to it because at the end of the day, she's a mother. She's going to check her son just like, anybody else mother would. But as long as, Patrick was cool, I was cool, and, we exchanged words, and I was happy that he was able to come back and play in the next playoff.
With Mack Wilson, reaching out to Mahomes, do you think that this really doesn't play much of a factor going into that week 1? Obviously, there's a lot of storylines going in there regardless, but I feel like this kind of checks one off that we don't need to have worried about going into week 1.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it was very well known. And in the heat of the moment, obviously, things are said and opinions are had. And then once you get down to it, after the dust settles, then you can really reevaluate it. And I think that's what happened with Mack Wilson and Patrick Mahomes. I think it was more of, hey, obviously you weren't trying to hurt me kind of thing. Mack Wilson reached out, apologized, and that's really what it's all about. It's just good sportsmanship and knowing, I might have messed up a little bit, not intentionally, but he hated that happened, and he went out and was the bigger person and apologized, and I think that's really important. And I do think that storyline isn't much of a storyline anymore. I think the bigger storyline is, they were in the playoffs, they won a playoff game, and they were right there, and, a couple plays gone their way, and the Browns could have had that one. And it's, I think that's probably the bigger storyline here is the Browns getting past them, because they're going to be a challenge no matter where they face them. If they make the playoffs, they make the postseason, the Chiefs are the team that you're going to have to go through. That's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge. And so that's the storyline is you played them once and you didn't quite go your way. So Now you take that, you evaluate what you were able to do and what you weren't able to do, and you try to take that next step against them. And it's going to be a very, very interesting thing to see in week one of how they respond to that and how they look. But as I said this before, I don't think that you can put a lot of stock into how, week one plays out. Win or lose for the Browns, I don't think that shapes how they would play each other in the playoffs and in the postseason. I think it would be a whole different animal, and it's going to be a whole different matchup. Definitely one you want to see, and I know Browns fans are keeping their fingers crossed that it actually happens and they get there, because they were close last year. They were very close last year, and I know that they are just chomping at the bit to get even further this year.
Camryn and I are going to take a quick timeout. When we come back, we're going to be talking about where Pro Football Focus has the Cleveland Browns offense heading into 2021, and which national pundit thinks that the Browns might be a little overrated on offense. You'll hear that all coming up next on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for fall classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Mac Robinson, and Pro Football Focus put out their top tiers for the offenses, and they had the Cleveland Browns. Up in the number one tier, you have the Kansas City Chiefs, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Green Bay Packers, Buffalo Bills, and the Cleveland Browns in the mix. Let's bring in WEWS digital content producer, Channel 5's own Camryn Justice. And Camryn, initial reaction, seeing the Cleveland Browns up there with all four teams that were in the conference championships last year in terms of offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's impressive and it's incredible, but it should be expected after what we saw last year. They had a great outing. They made it to the playoffs. They had their first playoff win. So this is what you expect, but it is insane to see, when you see these releases and you're seeing how, national outlets rank the Browns. It's always strange to see them near the top. You don't ever expect it. So that puts a lot of pressure on them, though. It puts a lot of pressure on the Browns. I don't know if if they like that or not. I would think they don't, because the chip on the shoulder kind of thing. But it is good to see them get the credit that they deserve for the work they've put in. And I think that if you were ranking it here in Cleveland, they'd probably be number one ranked. You know how Cleveland sees their team here.
Oh, of course. But, I mean, hey, you talk about the chip on the shoulder. Chris Broussard of Undisputed decided to, throw a little bit of the chip on the shoulder for them at this point. Let's hear what he had to say on why he doesn't think that the Browns should be in that top tier.
Cleveland is the question mark. We haven't seen them do it. They're the one team in this tier that doesn't have a tier one quarterback, right? Baker was different with OBJ. I think he'll be able to play well with OBJ this year.
He will now.
But that offense only averaged 25 points a game last year. That was middle of the pack. That offense only scored 10 points against Houston. And they had several other 22 points against Philadelphia. They had several other games where they didn't, 16 points against the New York Jets. And this was late in the season when they were clicking. All right, so while I like Cleveland, they're my pick in that division slightly over Baltimore. But I would like to exchange them in this tier for Tennessee.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, no. And to take away from middling. Like, I understand the 25 points a game. I get that. But if you take from that Tennessee Titans game, again, the offense that he said was, phenomenal and should be up there for the Browns instead, you take those final 7 games, including the playoffs, they averaged just shy of 30 points a game. And that Jets game that he brought up, they had 4 guys that they literally pulled off the street the day before. And so if you take that out there, they averaged 32 points a game. So, I mean, Camryn, I listen to what he says. I understand what he's getting at, but I'm just not buying it. I'm just not buying it with this offense.
I mean, like you said, I get the point that he's trying to make, and I get where you might want to put them a little bit lower if you're looking on the outside. But I think his point kind of got lost when he tried to substitute it with the Tennessee Titans. Not really sure how that one plays out there. Look, you've got the Browns, and they had to gel last year, and once they were on, they were on. But if you're looking at the talent and you're looking at what they're potentially able to do, you have to look at the Browns roster, and you have to look at the talent on board. You got the wide receiver room with Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., who has rehabbed like crazy to get back to show that he is still an elite presence in the wide receiver room. But then you also have these guys fighting out for wide receiver 3. You've got Donovan Peoples-Jones on your roster. You've got Kadero Hodge on your roster, who has been clutch for the Browns. And you've got these new guys like Anthony Schwartz, who's a burner out there, and he'll just beat you every single time. So that wide receiver room is stacked with talent. And then you've got the best backfield in the NFL in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And that's just unbelievable. And you're looking at the other teams across the league, and you think that you've got Nick Chubb, you've got 2 of the top possibly 5 running backs in the league on the same team, the same backfield, and then supplement that with another wide receiver running back duo in Demetric Felton, who has been great at camp and has a lot of potential here. And so there you go. There's your offense there. And then you have the tight end group, and you've got Austin Hooper ready to be dominant. He wasn't happy with his performance last season, but he's ready to show up here. David Njoku looking to have a big season. You've got all of these guys and all of this talent and all of these different offensive position groups. And the most important thing is that offensive line is so strong and all returning. You've got Joel Bitonio, Jack Conklin, J.C. Treader. You've got Wyatt Teller, who is a top guard who showed up and showed out last year. And then you've got Jedrick Wills, who impressed his rookie year, had a bigger year than anyone I think probably thought that he could. And now he's ready to go again. He's ready for his second year. And then you've got the guys coming in like Nick Harris. And so that offensive line is so strong. There's so much talent across that offensive board. And then to insult Baker Mayfield and say that he is not a tier 1 quarterback, I think that's kind of giving him a discredit. You've got to wait until you see this year. He's due for this big extension. He did great last season under the circumstances, too, of going through all of these different coaches. So the challenge for him now is this year. And I think you can't make that assessment until this year. This is the year that you really get to see Baker Mayfield shine. He had to prove himself last year, and now he has to solidify that this year with Kevin Stefanski returning, the same offense, the same offensive weapons. And so before that happens, I think it's very strange to be so down on them and so down on him, and to discredit the entire offense and the incredible talent that is across the roster on the offense. It's a strange take, in my opinion, but, let Chris have whatever opinion he has. We're not out here to judge. That's his opinion, and he can hold it, but I don't agree with it.
Right. And you know what? You're absolutely right. He can have an opinion. It might be a wrong one, but it's okay to have one. Everybody has one. So, but Camryn, I wanted to get your reaction to this too, because I know you have a piece up on WWS on your website. But Greedy Williams, Kevin Stefanski, they spoke about Donovan Peoples-Jones earlier today, and this is what they had to say about the young receiver.
Oh yeah, he having a great camp, catching a lot of contested balls, and got great releases and things like that. So DPJ is one of those guys. We definitely depend on him.
He's done a nice job. I mean, he's physically, when he showed up on campus here, he was ready to roll and looked great. Worked very hard in the off season. Been productive in practice, catch balls that are him, and then probably the most impressive thing, Nate, is special teams, running around, returning kicks, covering kicks. So he's an all-day guy right now.
Yeah, and you can hear the train in the background. I think that's everybody getting on board right now when it comes to his stock. So Camryn, your story, you talk about how he's learned to be a pro from Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. It really seems like he's really coming onto his own, here early on in training camp.
This is his camp. I mean, he is owning this camp. He is a fan favorite out here. Anytime that ball goes in his direction, the fans go wild. Every time he catches it, they get even crazier. And that's quite often here. He has done a phenomenal job through camp. He is in great shape. He's fast. He's strong. He's present. He is all over that field. And I do think, he said, Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry taught him so much. They taught him how to be a pro. And there's too many things, he said, there's too many things that they have taught him to list. It would be too long of a list for him to get into. But that just shows how much they're working with him and he's looking to learn. And his focus, he said, was practicing and training. That was his whole off season, was just focusing on training, trying to be the best player he can be. And he wants to do it all. He praised his own versatility and for good reason. He's able to do so much for this Browns team and, not just on offense. We know that he is an explosive wide receiver and he's already got great connection and chemistry with Baker Mayfield. But as Kevin Stefanski said today, that special teams presence that he provides, the ability to kick return, the ability to cover kicks, that is what sets him apart here, I think, at camp. And you're seeing him all over. He is playing in every situation that he can get his hands on. Everywhere that he can be, he's there. And he's just trying to be a presence. And that's huge. This is his second year. He had an impressive rookie year, but this is just his second year. And he's already doing big things out here in camp. And he's been one to watch. I said it earlier before training camp started. I think that he is one of the most talented young players on the Cleveland Browns, and I'm excited to see where he goes. And I think a lot of Browns fans are excited to see how much more he can do, because what he was able to do in a limited role last season can only get bigger this year. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out for him.
Camryn and I are going to step aside, take a timeout. When we come back, Pro Football Focus release where they have the Browns defense, and we'll be talking about where they are there, as well as some thoughts from one of the newest Cleveland Browns on the defense and where it stacks up in his career. Sports4CLE will be right back after this. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Mac Robinson. Pro Football Focus released their tiers for defense. Now, granted, in Tier 1, you have the LA Rams, Super Bowl champion Buccaneers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, I disagree with that a little bit, but the Denver Broncos, Washington Football Team, Baltimore Ravens, and then in Tier 2, you have the Saints, 49ers, Colts, Packers, Patriots, and your Cleveland Browns. To talk about that, let's bring in WEWS Channel 5 digital content producer Camryn Justice. And Camryn, we've had this remade defense. I understand we haven't quite seen it yet, but already getting that national love from Pro Football Focus for those defensive additions heading into training camp. What have you been able to see so far?
I mean, it's looking good on paper, and so far so good in training camp. You've got Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney, those bookends that everyone's been dying to see together. They have been explosive. Jadeveon Clowney is just right. They're just there. They are a quarterback nightmare. And they're going up against Baker Mayfield, and you've got to be glad that they are not on the opposing team, and they're not actually going to go against Baker Mayfield this season, because they are getting in there, and that's against one of the strongest offensive lines. They're being dominant, and I think that's really, really important to see. And they're on the outside, right? But you got the inside guys too. There's a big question mark there of who's going to start and who are they going to do, because you lost Sheldon Richardson and you lost Larry Ogunjobi, but you've now got some new guys in here, and you've got the Malik Jackson, you've got Tommy Togiai as a rookie coming in here, and a plethora of other guys out that you brought in from the offseason and free agency and in the draft. And so that defensive line, it's relatively new, but a lot of talent. And then, you've got the question marks in the backfield. You've got the defensive backs, and, you got a whole new defense across the board, really. But the linebacker position battle will be an interesting one to watch. We talked to Greedy, Williams, the cornerback position is going to be another one. And, those are the battles that, although, it's going to be a tough competition, Andrew Berry has said he loves his cornerbacks. Kevin Stefanski said there's going to be a lot of cornerbacks on this team. They need a lot. They need the depth. So all of those additions are going to be interesting to see. But talent across the board. There are so many new guys, but so much talent. And I think to get that love already is based off of the roster. I think they have the potential to move up a tier if what their talent on paper produces and translates on the field this season. But right now, I think that's a good spot for them to be in, because they're getting recognized for the talent they added, the guys that they have on the defensive roster. And then as the regular season approaches, I think you might see that step it up a little bit if they're able to perform the way that they should, talent-wise and on paper.
Now, linebacker Mack Wilson spoke earlier today, and he had this to say about those defensive additions overall on this team.
I was extremely happy, with all the guys that we brought in, on both sides of the ball, and especially with the guys we brought in on defense. It was big, it was huge. That goes back to Davion, John, Troy, AOK, Tony, Tat, Tommy, all those guys like that. Those was huge pieces for us, and it definitely create a competitive atmosphere in this organization. And we just gonna continue to keep working, having fun every day, keep putting this thing together. This game is competitive in general, and I feel like that's what the front office acknowledged, and they did a great job with putting guys together that's going to compete and bring the best out of each other. That's what we've been doing so far.
Now, Camryn, do you think that competition, you mentioned all the different position battles, you think that competition is going to end up, driving up the talent level overall of this roster?
Absolutely. They say it all the time, iron sharpens iron. I think having all of those guys compete against each other is going to be huge for the Browns defense and really big for how they perform, because yes, they're a team and they're bonding, and they've made that very clear that, they're trying to establish these bonds and trying to stay close, but at the same time, they know that their jobs are on the line, really, and they're fighting it out. And so I think that having those position battles with so much talent, it's going to be tough to separate, which makes it even more important for them to produce at camp and in these preseason games. And it's going to be very, very exciting to see. I think you're going to have a lot of big plays, explosive plays, and you're going to hear a lot about individual players who step it up here and there. When they find their moment, they're going to take advantage of it, because, there's only so many roster spots on this 53-man roster. The cuts are going to come soon. And so if you want a spot on this team, and let me tell you, Cleveland and the Cleveland Browns are a destination spot now for players in the NFL, and they want to be on this team. They want to be a part of this because they think that this is something special. And so, yes, I do think that it's going to get intense, because nobody wants to get cut. Everybody wants that starting job, and everybody wants a spot on this roster, because this is a team to play for, and this is a season to be a part of this. Because as they said, Jarvis Landry said it early into camp, he thinks that it's something special here. This is one of the most talented teams that he's played for. There's a lot of guys that are looking to take this to the next level, and I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how they play it out and in these position battles here through training camp and through the preseason.
Now, you mentioned, the additions. Jadeveon Clowney spoke earlier today about the talent level of this team and how it stacks up to some of the teams that he's played for in the past.
I think that's probably one of the talented teams, like the one I had in Houston, where they defense we had with Tyron and Jack and J. Joe and A.J. Boye out there corner. Like, all them guys, this is what they remind me of our secondary. Smart, fast. They play man coverage real good. It's just about the front just getting out the quarterback and letting them guys lock up on the back end. We should be okay.
Yeah, and him mentioning that defense, especially the secondary being smart, and then on top of that, the defensive line just getting after the quarterback. Do you think that, the versatility on this defense is going to be able to open up for those guys up front?
That's going to be the biggest thing, I think, for the Browns, and I think they're very excited about it. And that was a very big importance. That was a key part of this offseason is signing free agents and drafting guys who are versatile. You've got that across the board. You've got that in Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah, and he is, he's a hybrid player, but you have versatility in Greg Newsome, who you drafted. You've got versatility across the board. You've got Jadeveon Clowney, versatile, can move inside. And so that's going to be a very, very big part of the secondary and the Browns defensive line is being able to do so much, being able to be plugged in, playing in the slot, no matter where you're at, that they're going to perform. Didn't even mention Troy Hill playing inside and being able to play outside too. It's just across the board, everyone has roles and everyone has multiple roles because of that versatility. So I think that does open up a lot of different things. And I think probably the most excited, the Browns defensive coaching staff has to be so excited to be able to get different looks, throw out different things that they weren't maybe able to do last season with a limited roster and a lot of injuries across the board, not a lot of depth. You've got a lot of options now, and Joe Woods has to be so excited to see these guys out here and being able to use them in so many different ways. I think that's going to open up things a lot for the defense, and it's going to make them very competitive, and it's going to be a challenge for a lot of teams.
Now, Clowney also spoke about his potential on this defense, coming into 2021.
I don't know, man. I just got to wait to see. I don't know. I don't think I reached my potential. Yeah, I'll still be saying that. But every time I get going, I get hurt. Something happen, and I have to fall back or take something off. But hopefully this year just keep going up and keep getting better.
For Jadeveon Clowney, we've been looking for that second pass rusher to Myles Garrett. Seems like the Browns might have found that heading into 2021 in Jadeveon Clowney.
He is all over the field. He wants in there. He wants to be right next to Myles Garrett. He wants them to be the two top defensive players, and he said it too. In that press conference when we were talking to him, he said that, he's having a lot of fun, and he has fun because he's healthy. And he said when you're healthy, you have fun. He is out there. He's feeling good. He says this is the best offseason he's ever had in terms of being able to get on board with the team and be able to work through it and be healthy. And so that's a really big thing for him going into this season. This is his healthiest in a very long time. And so, when you pair that with, you're the guy on one end, but then you have Myles Garrett on your other end, that's incredible for that defense. And it's incredible for him. And I know that he's very excited about it, to be able to show off that he still has it and to show off that he is healthy and he's ready to go, and he's come to camp prepared. He had a good offseason rehabbing, and he's feeling it. I think it's really, really important, and I think that you're going to see that a lot. And not only are they going to be happy on the defensive line, but because you've got Myles Garrett and you've got Jadeveon Clowney ready, healthy, going inside, putting pressure on that quarterback, they're going to have a much easier job in the secondary. Those linebackers, those safeties, they're going to have a lot of leeway there, and not a lot less pressure on them if they're able to, get into the quarterback the way that they want to, and the way they're looking like they're getting to in these drills and these teams, the 7-on-7s, the way they're forcing themselves in there. It's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty good so far. But it's training camp, so, everyone's going to be like, it's training camp. But they look good so far. So, you've got to give them some kind of credit there, right?
Well, hey, you hope that they look good, at least in training camp. We've had it the other way in the past. But Camryn and I are going to take a timeout. When we come back, we're going to be hearing from a national pundit who is talking about who's under more pressure for the Cleveland Browns in 2021 and getting in those Madden 22 rankings coming right up after this. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Mac Robinson, and earlier today on ESPN's Get Up, Damian Woody spoke about who's under more pressure in 2021, Baker Mayfield or Odell Beckham. Here's what he said.
Oh, it's Odell, because we saw what happened with Baker Mayfield after Odell got hurt. He took the Browns deep into the postseason. So I think Baker Mayfield is feeling a lot more comfortable coming into year 2 of Kevin Stefanski's system. And I think it's incumbent upon Odell to kind of work himself back into the mix, because we saw what Cleveland did in the postseason. This team is still predicated by the 2 backs that they have in the backfield with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and they got guys on the outside that can go out there and make plays. So to me, Odell Beckham Jr. is a luxury piece in this situation. If he comes back healthy, he'll add a different dynamic to the passing game that the Cleveland Browns didn't have last year.
I think it's a fair point, but let's bring in Camryn Justice, WEWS Channel 5's digital content producer. And Camryn, it seems like Odell obviously is coming into camp, under that pressure to produce with Baker Mayfield, but I feel like it's a little bit easier on him given the other weapons around him. And, it seems like the pressure's a little bit off of him, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think the pressure from the team and from the outside even is as strong as you would think. I don't think that's what the pressure is. Less on Odell and more on Baker Mayfield in that sense, but I think the pressure that he's putting on himself is probably a little bit higher than anybody else, because he had to deal with the sound from the outside, and as much as they have been very good about coaching up the players and telling them don't listen to the outside noise, don't worry about that, he hears it, he sees it, he's very present on social media, and he knows what has been said about him, and he knows what's being said nationally about him, and that narrative that the Browns are better without Odell Beckham Jr. on the field. And so I think that probably puts a little bit more pressure on him personally. I think the pressure that he's going to apply to himself this season is going to be higher than anyone else on the outside or anybody, in the organization putting pressure on him in that sense. So when it comes down to outside noise and outside pressure from the team and from fans and from, just the national outlet and everybody watching, I think the pressure is probably more on Baker Mayfield, but I think that Odell probably is putting more pressure on himself than maybe Baker Mayfield is. I think Baker Mayfield has that confidence level that he was able to gain throughout the season, and he's going to take that into this season, whereas Odell started catching his stride, and him and Baker started to have some chemistry there down the stretch, but then he was taken out with injury. So I think that's kind of something a hurdle that he's going to have to get over. So pressure-wise, probably more on Odell from himself than anything else.
Now, Madden 22, it's coming out here in a couple weeks, and we've seen slowly but surely more and more ratings coming out. It's been causing a little bit of controversy, but a little bit of fun earlier today, where we saw the Browns guard Wyatt Teller. He actually spoke and reacted to, in particular, his catch rating earlier today. Give it a listen.
So you have a lot of strengths and high ratings, but what do you think your catching rating is?
Well, I actually have a catch in the NFL, so it better be higher than Joel's, is what I'm saying. 70.
No, cut that in half.
35?
No, 36.
Oh, come on, man.
You gotta make a couple more catches this year, and you'll
there
get
was
up there.
There was a game, Steelers game, I think it was 2 years ago, and there was a betting line that Jarvis would, if someone put my name down, they would have made $100,000 because I had the first catch in the game. Now, I didn't get any yards. I kind of went backwards into the sideline trying to get out of there, but I caught the ball.
A catch is a catch, in my book at least.
This is BS.
Now, Camryn, I love Wyatt Teller, and I love the personality, but, for him, you just love to see that out of your guard.
Listen, I think Wyatt Teller's probably the happiest guy on this team. He's so excited to be out here, and he's a fun guy. He loves Cleveland. He wants to be in Cleveland, and he's been very, very good about bonding with his offensive line, and they were getting together all off season, working out, just really getting to know each other and become buddies. And they're looking forward to doing that even more and having their O-line dinners again. And I think that he probably should have got a higher rating. Let's be fair. He had a catch, right? He was right. That was a good point that he made. And also, you got to give it to him. He's a good guy. You just help him out there with the ratings. Shame on Madden for ranking him so low.
You know what? We say it every year. You gotta up the rankings there. Come on, Madden. Come on. It's in the game. Come on. Camryn Justice, WWS Channel 5 digital content producer, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
All right, we're going to take a quick timeout. When we come back, Yahoo Sports' Eric Edholm going to be joining me to talk about the NFL perspective of the Cleveland Browns and what to expect from some of these rookies and young players on this roster. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and so is the job market. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. Register now for online and on-campus classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Mac Robinson. And, you know, the big news of the day has been Baker Mayfield's waiting for his contract extension. Lamar Jackson was waiting for his. Josh Allen was waiting for his. Josh Allen waits no longer. 6 years, $258 million to sign on the dotted line to stay in Buffalo, adding on another 6 years through 2028. To talk about that, let's bring in Eric Edholm of Yahoo Sports. And Eric, you know, the big domino of Josh Allen, quite literally and physically at this point, has fallen. What were your initial thoughts on Josh Allen, and what do you think this does for Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, they're certainly the next two quarterbacks in line, you would think, both from that same class. Sam Darnold obviously is, you know, in limbo at this point with the Carolina Panthers until proven otherwise. So I think they're the next two that you could look at and at least start with what Allen got and then make adjustments for there. It reminded me a little bit of what Patrick Mahomes signed, more of a long-term contract, maybe for less money, or maybe by the end of the deal, we'll look at it and say, wow, Josh Allen's only the 11th highest paid quarterback because salaries continue to go upward, not last year notwithstanding. So, you know, I guess the question is, can Baker Mayfield play at Josh Allen's level? I wouldn't say that he's quite gotten there yet, at least where Allen has been over the last, you know, year and a half or so, or, you know, the end of the 19 season into the 2020 season. So, you know, Lamar's going to be a taste-specific kind of guy, but I think obviously the Ravens have a great chance at re-signing him for somewhat similar money, at least on a per-year basis, maybe even a little more for a short-term deal. But, yeah, it all depends on what these guys' comfort level is in taking a 4 or 5 year deal versus 6 and beyond. Are they willing to give up, you know, kind of that floor, that minimum amount of money in order to try to cash in more later down the road?
Now, Eric, with what we have currently here on the roster here in Cleveland and, you know, sticking with the present, in training camp, one of the biggest stars that we've seen has been Donovan Peoples-Jones, and he seems to be taking that next leap, you know, adding on a little bit of weight constantly. It seems like every day he's making big plays. You know, for you, what were your thoughts on him coming out of Michigan And, what are your expectations going into year 2 for him? Do you think he can take that, sophomore leap at that point?
Yeah, he was inside my top 100 last year. I want to say he was number 94, 96, somewhere in that range. So I liked him a lot. And the thing about Michigan was the inconsistent quarterback play. They had trouble getting their stars the ball, especially at wide receiver the last couple of years. A couple guys transferred out. A couple were kind of going through the motions because they didn't sort of feel like they were going to be getting the ball enough. And early in the year, you sort of saw Donovan Peoples-Jones being brought along slowly. They had some depth. OBJ goes down. They want a little bit more size, a little bit more explosion. They start getting them involved. And, the touchdown against the Titans was as an eye-opener. And, he had some big plays. Whenever you see a guy that size averaging the yards per catch he did, what was it, over 20, I believe, it certainly catches your attention. And I think last year was definitely a learning year for him, but it was so encouraging down the stretch. Even with, the limited number of catches he made, you could see that physical prowess really coming through and his confidence seemingly gaining. So, they clearly gave him a bigger offensive share of the load. The number of snaps he got down the stretch, played a lot in the playoff games. So I think this year you'll see the production match those snaps. And as you said, it's sort of coming out in camp, and I think Baker trusts him. And, you could never turn down that size of playmaker and guys with that kind of ability.
Now, from the Browns 2020 class over to the 2021 class, their first pick, Greg Newsome, he was somebody I personally loved coming out of Northwestern. I know you're in the Chicago area, so that's right in your backyard. So, what were your thoughts on Greg Newsome coming out, and how do you kind of see him fitting, opposite of Denzel Ward in this defense?
Yeah, he didn't play a lot last year, right? I mean, he only played 5-6 games, I want to say off the top of my head. Injuries were an issue. But when he did play, he played extremely well. I mean, really didn't give up many catches at all. Confident, really borderline cocky man cover corner, not blessed with incredible size, but, just turned 21 years old, great fluidity. He has a little Denzel Ward in his game, I think, and maybe even a little bit more feisty version of him. So the number of passes he got his hands on in college, despite injuries every single season, that was really the big eye-opener for me. Some people said, only one career pick, and, he's not a playmaker. I believe he will be a playmaker. Some of those deflected passes will turn into interceptions. Now, the questions about the durability, they're going to be there. I think his competitiveness, his football temperament, and his athletic traits set him up very well for success. But, the best ability is availability. And I think the Northwestern coaches would have loved to have him out there more than, 70% of the games or whatever he played the last 3 years.
Now, speaking of availability, second-round pick Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He was originally placed on the COVID list, but he has practiced the past couple days. Eric, for you, do you think that for JOK, he's going to be able to kind of overcome that despite, being a little bit behind the 8 ball, missing those first, few days of training camp, especially coming into his rookie season?
Yeah, and another player with some durability concerns a little bit, just because of his size and his physical nature. I mean, I love both players, and especially Jeremiah's, kind of linebacker game and a safety body, and he can cover and he can drop and he can rush. And, another player who's going to be so valuable on third downs, I think, because of his flexibility. You want him to cover tight ends or backs, he can do it. He could be your slot guy too. He could be an off-the-ball linebacker. So there's a lot to get excited about. This is a player who enrolled in college when he was 17 years old, just now kind of hitting his physical prime at age 21, I would say. You see the plays he makes around the line of scrimmage. There's a lot to be excited about. The medical obviously was a big part of it. I think had this been a normal draft cycle and the interruption of medical information getting into teams' hands, if that hadn't have been there, I do think he would have been closer to the first-round pick that a lot of people projected than the somewhat later mid-second-round pick that he was. So the Browns very much could have gotten a steal here. The value was absolutely there until proven otherwise. So I think he's got a great opportunity, but you always fear, like with I'm blanking on the Simmons from Clemson.
Isaiah Simmons,
yeah. Cardinals. Yeah, Isaiah, thank you. With the hybrid guys, when you're trying to teach them maybe 4 or 5 different positions or multiple roles, it can get a little hairy for some of these rookies as complex as that Notre Dame defense was, it's still going to be taken up a level. So maybe start them with one or two things and kind of branch off from there.
Now, do you think that, obviously we've seen the amount of versatility that the Browns have added this offseason, do you think that too much versatility is a thing in today's NFL, obviously with a bunch of different players that you can kind of move around?
It's nice to have, right? But you're assuming that all those players are masters of each of those positions, right? Whether you stick them at nickel or outside or inside or what have you. Not everybody can master multiple positions just because you have the athletic traits. You may even have the football intelligence, the wherewithal to do it, but you may not physically be able to. Whatever the shortcoming is, it's hard to find players who can play multiple roles very, very well. There's some guards who can play tackle, guards who can play center, et cetera, receivers who can play inside and out. But, yeah, I mean, I think that versatility gets stretched at some point. If you're expecting, everybody to play at the same level they would at their most natural or the strongest position. So it's still going to come down to what do guys do best. Coach that I talk to a lot always says, tell me what a guy can do, not what he can't do. And that'll help kind of whittle down what their assignments are going to be, I think.
Eric Edholm and I are going to take a timeout. When we come back, we're going to be talking about which teams are getting too much love, which teams aren't getting enough love, and the ghosts of Ohio State's past, present, and future quarterback room. We'll be right back on Sports4CLE after this. Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Mac Robinson, and let's bring in Eric Edholm, Yahoo Sports, NFL draft expert for Yahoo Sports. And Eric, to get things started, let's start off in the NFL. What is one team that you think is getting too much love heading into the 2021 season?
Well, had you asked me prior to Carson Wentz's injury, I probably would have said the Indianapolis Colts. And I like this team a lot. I think it's a young, budding roster, but the unknown nature of Wentz's injury and how long, 5 to 12 weeks, that's a pretty big span. I don't think that's a fair answer anymore. So I'll go to a different team, and I'll kind of question whether, the Carolina Panthers, they've been getting a little bit more excitement, or some people feel like, okay, Sam Darnold gives them the playmaker they need. Joe Brady's a great play caller. They've helped beef up the defense the last couple of drafts, added a few other pieces. Christian McCaffrey comes back, but to me, that's still a really tough division. I know it's a little bit unfair picking a 7-9 team, but the number of close losses they had last year, some often with the ball in their hands with a chance to win it, where they didn't come through with the victory. I've seen a lot of folks out there sort of say, well, hey, those are games they can now win, but it all pins on Darnold. And I don't know that I'm comfortable yet going in on him and saying, oh, sure, he's going to be a clear upgrade over what Teddy Bridgewater gave to him. So that's one that I would say is on the, over-optimistic side of teams that, may not quite be ready for prime time. On the opposite side, though, it's hard not to get excited about all the players coming back for the San Francisco 49ers and what Trey Lance could potentially give them at quarterback. I know Jimmy Garoppolo is the nominal starter right now. He may be the week 1 starter, but they're going to have a role for Trey Lance. His first reps with the first team were operating some quarterback run game. I'm sure they're going to get his arm involved. He's been throwing a lot with the twos as well. And just think, Nick Bosa and all those pieces they lost to injury on defense last year, they're all coming back. Kyle Shanahan, full array of weapons. I like this team to bounce back even in a tough NFC West.
You think that Trey Lance is actually in that starting competition? I know that Shanahan downplays it quite a bit, but I feel like you got to go with Lance. I feel like he adds more to the offense at that point.
It depends where Jimmy is and whether they feel like they can kind of carve out a role for Trey and kind of build him along. Remember, he's only 20 years old. He doesn't turn 21, I don't believe, until October 3rd or something like that. So still a very young kid, still somebody who had only 60 minutes of football last year, competitive game football last year. His freshman year at North Dakota State, they won a title. They went 16-0, but they also relied on him running the ball a lot. That's really what he's going to be sort of asked to do in a slimmed down role. Not too different really from what Jim Harbaugh did in San Francisco with Colin Kaepernick in his second season. So that's what I would guess things start out as. And if Jimmy doesn't respond, if he doesn't play well, if there are issues with him, injuries have been a problem for Jimmy, they've got no choice but to turn it over to the kid. And so far in camp, I mean, he's answered the bell, I would say.
Speaking from one rookie quarterback battle to another in Chicago, Justin Fields, Ohio State quarterback, he's facing off against the former AFC North darling. I don't know if I'll go that far, but Andy Dalton, I guess darling for other teams. But Andy Dalton going in as a starter. When do you think that Justin Fields ends up taking over that job, or do you think that Andy Dalton's going to be able to hold it down?
So Matt Nagy, the head coach, has been pretty adamant. Andy's our starter. He's of course allowed for the possibility of Dalton getting hurt. Certainly possible. He's been pretty reliable in his career. Andy Dalton is actually probably a better quarterback than his reputation would suggest. He's been a little bit unfairly picked on. So as good as Fields reportedly has looked, I'll be out there next week. I haven't seen him other than mini camps. So I think they're going to stick with this plan, and people will groan and grumble, and I get it. I understand why you want to see the kid. Fields has looked good so far. People are raving about him. But I think they're going to give Dalton the opportunity to start until he shouldn't start anymore. He's got Aaron Donald and the Rams week 1. I believe they face the Bengals, his former team, in week 2. If he were to come out of that 0-2 or get beaten up or just not make the right reads and throw some, turn the ball over, then they've got a decision on their hands. Don't forget, Tyrod Taylor was the week 1 starter before Justin Herbert got his chance. Tom Savage started the opener a few years back instead of Deshaun Watson. We've seen this before, right? The leash isn't often very long, so it could be as short as a game or two, provided there are no injuries. And then you just kind of go from there, right? If you can't beat the Browns early in the year, if they clobber the Bears, that's the situation where I could see that the Bears the next week saying, all right, we've got to give this kid a chance.
Now, going from, quarterbacks pass from Ohio State to what you've got now heading into 2021, Quinn Ewers ends up adjusting his status. So now he's going to be joining the Buckeyes heading into 2021. You already got C.J. Stroud. You got Jack Miller, Kyle McCord. What are your thoughts on, now Quinn Ewers kind of looming in that Ohio State quarterback room heading into 2021?
Yeah, I mean, how much can he handle right away? It's obviously fascinating. Stroud, everybody's sort of talked about as the possibility, I know. And look, it's a dream situation for most quarterbacks, right? They have some key pieces back on offense, great receivers. Jeremy Ruckert, I think, is going to be great at tight end this year. It's absolutely set up for success, especially with Ryan Day calling plays. But would they turn it over to the freshman, the true freshman who should be in high school? I mean, that's the fascinating question right now, and I can't wait to see what they end up doing. But obviously, this is a Buckeyes team that I think remains loaded. A ton of NFL draft talent as well. Smith and Garrett up front on defense. The Seven Banks, I think, is really a high ceiling if he ever kind of fulfills his potential. Even with all the losses last year, this is a team to be reckoned with. But like you said, everything kind of focuses on what their decision is going to be a quarterback.
Eric Edholm, Yahoo Sports NFL draft expert. Eric, thank you so much for hopping on with me. I appreciate the time.
All right, buddy. Talk to you real soon, man. Thanks.
Talk to you soon. Special thanks to Eric and Camryn Justice for joining me today. On Monday, Dave Bacon back in the chair, back hosting with Mary Kay Cabot and Ellis Williams joining him. This is Mac Robinson. Thank you all for watching. Appreciate your time. Have a good weekend, Cleveland.